I was having dinner alone at Marcellus, the finest restaurant in the city. When I saw him, my ex-husband Thaddeus walked in with a woman young enough to be his daughter. She was 29, blonde, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I'm Isolde Bannister, 61 years old, and I'd been divorced from Thad for exactly 8 months. He spotted me immediately, and I watched his face cycle through surprise, discomfort, then something that looked like malicious glee. He whispered something to his girlfriend Meadow, and they were seated at a table directly in my line of sight. Thad wanted me to watch him with his young girlfriend. He wanted me to feel old, discarded, replaced. What he didn't know was that I'd been expecting this moment. I'd actually arranged it. Let me explain how I ended up here. Thad and I were married for 37 years. We built a life together, raised our daughter Reverie, accumulated wealth through my software consulting business. Yes, my business. I was the primary earner for most of our marriage. Thad worked in middle management at a pharmaceutical company, making decent money but nothing spectacular. My consulting firm, Bannister Solutions, brought in 3 to 5 million annually. I'd built it from nothing, working 18-hour days, while Thad enjoyed comfortable employment with set hours and no stress. When we divorced 8 months ago, Thad claimed he deserved half of everything because he'd supported my career. His lawyer argued that his emotional support and household management had enabled my success. It was absurd, but California is a community property state. The divorce settlement gave Thad $2.3 million, half our house sale proceeds, and half my retirement accounts. He walked away with nearly $4 million total from a marriage where I'd earned 80% of our income. I was furious but accepted it because fighting would have cost more in legal fees. Thad immediately started dating Meadow, a yoga instructor he'd apparently been seeing for months before our divorce. He posted pictures constantly on social media, showing off his young girlfriend, his new sports car, his upgraded lifestyle. He wanted everyone, especially me, to see that he'd moved on to someone better, someone younger, prettier, more fun than his old, boring ex-wife. Friends told me he'd been making comments at social gatherings about how I'd let myself go, how I'd been too focused on work, how he deserved happiness. It hurt, I won't pretend it didn't. But I'd been planning something. Thad didn't know that during our marriage, I'd been very careful about certain financial arrangements. My consulting firm had multiple revenue streams. The primary business, Bannister Solutions, was marital property that he got half of in the divorce. But 3 years before we separated, I'd created a subsidiary company called Frost Consulting, named after my business partner Quinlan Frost. That company handled our largest contracts, particularly our work with tech giants and financial institutions. Legally, Frost Consulting was a separate entity, established with documented capital investment from Quinlan, operating independently with its own tax ID and corporate structure. Thad never paid attention to my business details. He didn't know Frost Consulting existed, and because it was established as a separate entity with clear documentation predating our separation, it wasn't considered in our divorce settlement. Frost Consulting generated approximately $8 million annually. It held contracts worth over $30 million. My ownership stake, carefully documented and legally sound, was worth approximately $15 million. My divorce lawyer, Miss Paloma Hendricks, had reviewed everything meticulously. Mrs. Bannister, this asset is yours alone. It was never marital property because of how it was structured and funded. Your ex-husband has no claim to it. Thad thought he'd gotten half my wealth. He'd actually gotten a fraction. I let him believe he'd won, let him think I was struggling while he flourished. Meanwhile, I was wealthier than I'd ever been, with full control of my most profitable business. Tonight, at this restaurant, I was going to let Thad see exactly what he'd underestimated. But first, I needed everything to be perfectly staged. I'd arranged this dinner carefully. Marcellus was owned by Chef Marcellus Verne, a client whose restaurant chain I'd helped build through strategic software solutions. He owed me several favors. I'd called him 3 days ago. Marcellus, I need your help with something unusual. I explained that my ex-husband would be dining at his restaurant with his girlfriend, and I wanted to stage a particular scene. Marcellus, who'd met Thad during our marriage and disliked him intensely, agreed immediately. Isolde, anything you need. That man is a parasite who lived off your success. We choreographed everything, the waiter, a young man named Jonquil, was briefed on exactly what to do and when. Now, watching Thad and Meadow order expensive wine and appetizers. I prepared for the performance. I finished my meal slowly, savoring every bite, waiting for the right moment. Thad kept glancing over at me, clearly wanting to see if I was watching him with Meadow. I made sure to look occasionally, keeping my expression neutral. Meadow was giggling at everything Thad said, touching his arm, playing the adoring girlfriend perfectly. Thad looked smug, satisfied. He'd wanted to show me he'd moved on to someone better. When I finished my meal, I signaled for my check. Jonquil brought it over, the bill totaling $240 for my solo dinner. I handed him a credit card, an old card I deliberately brought for this purpose. Jonquil took it, disappeared for a moment, then returned with an apologetic expression. "Ma'am, I'm very sorry, but your card was declined. Do you have another form of payment?" His voice was loud enough that several nearby tables turned to look, including Thad's table. I watched Thad's face transform. His smugness turned to shock, then to something uglier, satisfaction mixed with contempt. He said something to Meadow, who looked over at me with obvious pity. I could read his thoughts perfectly. His ex-wife, the supposedly successful businesswoman, couldn't even pay for dinner. Her card was declined. She must be struggling financially after the divorce. Maybe she wasn't as wealthy as she'd pretended. I kept my expression calm, slightly embarrassed, as if I was genuinely caught off guard. "Oh my, that's strange," I said to Jonquil. "Let me try another card." I made a show of searching through my wallet, looking progressively more worried. Thad was watching intently now, barely pretending to focus on his own meal. He wanted to see me humiliated. He wanted validation that leaving me had been the right choice. I pulled out a second card, handed it to Jonquil. He disappeared again, returned shaking his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this card was also declined. Perhaps there's an issue with your bank." By now, several tables were openly staring. Meadow whispered something to Thad, who smiled coldly. I could see him considering whether to offer to pay my bill, to publicly demonstrate his superiority and my dependence. But before he could move, I smiled calmly at Jonquil. "Oh, I see what happened. I've been using my old personal cards. Let me use my business card instead." I reached into my purse and pulled out a black American Express Centurion card, the famous black card, issued only to individuals spending at least $500,000 annually, with assets exceeding $16 million. The card that required a $10,000 initiation fee and $5,000 yearly fee just to possess. Jonquil took the card, his expression perfectly neutral as we'd rehearsed. He processed it immediately, no decline this time, and returned with the receipt. "Thank you, Miss Bannister, your card is approved. And actually, I have a message from Chef Vern. He'd like to comp your entire meal tonight as thanks for your continued partnership." I smiled. "That's very kind, but please charge the card anyway. And add a 50% tip for your excellent service." I signed the receipt with a flourish, making sure the black Centurion card was visible on the table. From the corner of my eye, I saw Thad's face had gone pale. He recognized that card. He knew what it meant. You couldn't fake a Centurion card. You couldn't get one without serious wealth. And I definitely hadn't had one during our marriage. I stood gracefully, collected my purse, and started to leave. As I passed Thad's table, he stood abruptly. "Isolde, wait." I turned, keeping my expression polite and distant. "Yes, Thaddeus," he gestured to the black card still visible in my hand. "That's a Centurion card. When did you get that?" I smiled gently. "Oh, about 2 years ago. My business has been doing quite well." I could see his brain working, trying to understand. During our divorce, my finances had been thoroughly documented. He'd gotten half of everything he knew about. How could I possibly have a card that required assets he hadn't seen? Meadow looked confused, not understanding the significance. Thad looked like he was going to be sick. "But the divorce settlement," he stammered. "You gave me detailed financial statements." "I got half of everything," I nodded. "You got half of our marital property. Exactly what the law required." Understanding was starting to dawn on Thad's face. "What does that mean?" I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice conversational but with steel underneath. "It means you got half of the assets that were subject to community property division. My newer business ventures, the ones I established with separate capital and proper legal structures before our separation, were never marital property. You never asked about them, and your lawyer never found them because they were legitimately separate." Thad's face went from pale to red. That's fraud, you hid assets. I shook my head calmly. No, Thaddeus. I followed the law precisely. Everything subject to division was disclosed and divided. You simply assumed that was everything I had. Your mistake, not my fraud. Meadow was looking between us, starting to realize something important had just happened. Other diners were still watching, fascinated by the drama. Thad grabbed my arm, then immediately released it when I looked pointedly at his hand. How much? His voice was rough. How much are these other businesses worth? I considered not telling him, but I'd come here specifically for this moment. My business holdings outside our divorce settlement are currently valued at approximately $15 million, plus ongoing revenue of about $8 million annually. The number hit him like a physical blow. He'd been so proud of his $4 million divorce settlement. He'd thought he'd won. Now he was learning I'd walked away with almost 4 times what he'd received, plus a thriving business he knew nothing about. That's impossible, he whispered. How could I not know? I smiled. And it wasn't kind, because you never paid attention to my work. Thaddeus, you enjoyed spending the money I earned, but you never cared how I earned it. Meadow spoke for the first time. Her voice small. Thad, you told me she was broke. You said the divorce left her with almost nothing. Thad didn't respond, still staring at me with something like horror. I looked at Meadow directly. Thaddeus received approximately $4 million in our divorce settlement, half of our known marital assets. He's far from broke, but he wanted you to think I was struggling because it made him feel powerful. I turned back to Thad. You've been telling everyone I let myself go, that I was boring, that you deserved better. You've been showing off your new girlfriend and new lifestyle, trying to make me feel old and discarded. Did it work? Thad couldn't speak. I continued, my voice quiet but clear. Because I've been doing quite well. Thaddeus, better than I ever did while married to you, actually. Chef Marcellus appeared then, as we'd planned. Miss Bannister, your car is ready whenever you are. And thank you again for your investment in our new location. The expansion wouldn't be possible without your backing. He nodded politely to Thad. Mr. Bannister, I hope you're enjoying your evening. Then he walked away. Thad looked like he'd been slapped again. Investment, you're investing in restaurant chains. I nodded, among other things. I'm diversifying my portfolio. Real estate, tech startups, hospitality. I've discovered I'm quite good at identifying profitable opportunities. I checked my watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than Thad's sports car. I really should go. I have an early meeting tomorrow with potential partners in Singapore. International clients, very lucrative. I looked at Meadow, who was staring at Thad with new eyes. Enjoy your dinner, the salmon here is excellent. I walked out of Marcellus into the cool evening air, where my driver was waiting with my car, a understated but expensive Mercedes S-Class. As we pulled away, I saw Thad standing in the restaurant window. Watching me leave, my phone buzzed. A text from my daughter Reverie. Mom, I just got a weird call from Dad. He's freaking out about your businesses. What happened? I smiled and called her back, explaining the evening's events. Reverie started laughing. Mom, that's brilliant. He's been so obnoxious about Meadow and his new life. He needed to know you're not just surviving. You're thriving. We talked for 20 minutes about business, about life, about her plans to join my firm after finishing her MBA. Reverie had my mind for business and none of her father's laziness. She was going to be extraordinary. Over the next few days, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Thad was spiraling. He'd called his divorce lawyer, demanding to know how I could have hidden assets. The lawyer had patiently explained that separate business entities, established with documented separate capital, weren't marital property and didn't need to be disclosed if they weren't subject to division. Thad tried to argue fraud, but his lawyer shut that down immediately. Everything I'd done was completely legal. Thad had simply been too lazy and too arrogant to investigate thoroughly. He'd assumed he knew everything about my finances because I'd never hidden my main business from him. He never considered I might have grown beyond what he could see. I also heard that Meadow had broken up with him. Apparently, learning that Thad had walked away from a marriage to a multimillionaire to date her had made her reconsider his decision-making abilities. A week after the restaurant incident, Thad called me directly. Isolde, we need to talk. I considered refusing, but curiosity won. About what? Thaddeus, his voice was deflated, missing all its usual confidence. I made a mistake, a huge mistake. I shouldn't have left you. I shouldn't have treated you the way I did. I waited, he continued, I thought I was getting a great settlement. Thought I was moving on to something better. But Meadow left me, and now I'm seeing what I actually gave up. Not just the money, but you, your strength, your intelligence, your success. I listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, I spoke calmly. Thaddeus, you didn't leave me for something better. You left me because you couldn't handle being married to someone more successful than you. You wanted to feel important, and you couldn't do that while living in my shadow. Thad started to protest, but I cut him off. No, let me finish. For 37 years, I built businesses while you coasted in a comfortable job. I earned the majority of our income while you enjoyed the lifestyle it provided. And instead of being proud of me, instead of being a true partner, you resented me, you made me feel guilty for my success. You diminished my achievements and made everything about your ego. My voice was steady, not angry, just honest. The divorce was the best thing that could have happened to me. Thaddeus, I'm free now, free to build without someone undermining me, free to succeed without someone trying to make me feel small about it. And I'm happy, genuinely happy. Thad was quiet for a long moment. Is there any chance we could try again? I've changed, I see things differently now. I almost laughed. No, Thaddeus. There's no chance you haven't changed. You're just realizing what you lost. I hung up and blocked his number. That chapter of my life was finished. I'm 62 now, running multiple successful businesses, mentoring young entrepreneurs, traveling the world, living fully. The restaurant incident became a favorite story among my business circle, a reminder that success is the best revenge. My daughter Reverie joined my firm and is already brilliant at client relations. We're planning expansion into Asian markets next year. As for Thad, I heard he's dating someone age-appropriate now and has finally accepted that our marriage is over. Sometimes I think about that moment in the restaurant, watching his face when he saw the Centurion card, when he realized everything he'd assumed about me was wrong. I don't take joy in his pain, but I do take satisfaction in my victory. He tried to humiliate me, to prove he'd moved on to better things. Instead, he learned that I'd always been the better thing. And now, I was completely beyond his reach. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Never let anyone make you feel small for your success. Build your wealth strategically, protect your assets, and remember that the best response to those who underestimate you is simply to prove them spectacularly wrong. Thank you for listening. Protect business assets through proper legal structures. Document separate property clearly. Understand community property laws. Never let anyone diminish your success. Financial independence is freedom. Before you go, I need to know something. What hit you the hardest? The betrayal. The moment everything fell apart. The twist you never saw coming. Drop it in the comments right now. And tell me what you want to see next. Medical fraud, family secrets, financial crimes, hidden identities. Your ideas become our next stories. If this story kept you glued to the screen, hit that like button. If you want more shocking true stories that expose the truth, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next. Thanks for letting me share this story with you. The next one drops soon, and it's going to shake you even harder. See you there.